I mean, if it doesn't have an airport, then I'm not obviously going to be looking at that. On retail, though,
That's a big one. I feel like we shouldn't pass over that. If it doesn't, I remember pitching you deals. I remember pitching deals, and you're like, how long is it going to take to get there? And I was like, 12 hours. There's not a direct flight. And you're like, pass.
Yeah.
I'm out.
And, could I invest in a small market in Oklahoma that I can go drive to it? Maybe. But the smaller the market, the more you need to know about it, because small markets can go away.
Mm-hmm. Welcome back to How to Invest in Commercial Real Estate. My name is Braden, and today we are going over how you're looking at so many deals. I mean, you're probably looking at 50, 100 deals a week, maybe a little more, maybe a little less, and you've got to figure out a system to efficiently go through these deals to find out if they're good for you, if they're good for your investors, if you can get debt, if you can raise equity, what the returns are. You've got to be able to, in 10, 15 minutes, say, yeah, this sucks, or yeah, this is going to be awesome. I want to look more.
Maybe even quicker. If you're looking at 100, 200 deals a month, you may not even be able to spend that long.
Yeah, maybe there's a certain thing that you eliminate that deal immediately. Maybe it's a couple minutes, a minute. So,
well, for me, everyone's going to have their objectives when investing in commercial real estate. And it may be that they have a niche because they worked on a development company, so they're looking for development or development land. There may be someone that had experience with multi-tenant retail, so that's what they're going to be looking for. And same with multifamily. They may have worked at a management company, and now they're looking to buy a multifamily. And so everyone's going to have to come up with a system on how they find the deals that they want to buy. But for me, I have 5, 6, 7 criteria that help me get through the inbox of hundreds and hundreds of deals that flow through. And the first one that makes it easy, and we've talked about this term, is cap rate.
Mm-hmm. So that's the first thing you look at. You'll see that property, you'll see the cap rate, and how do you evaluate?
Because we're looking for cash flow day one. Typically, there are all kinds of deals. Some deals won't cash flow day one.
Yeah.
But I'm typically looking for cash flow deals, and so that cap rate is the first indicator that tells me, given the debt I can place, is can I get a cash on cash return where I can distribute to my investors day one. And so if it's a really nice brand new retail deal in a good area and it's a 5.5 cap, I can pass on that right away because it's not going to meet my cash on cash returns. Doesn't mean it's not a good deal. It just isn't what I'm currently looking for.
Because of that low cap rate.
Yeah, retail. If it's a retail deal, 5.5 cap. Now, multifamily, a little different. You can get better debt on it, so you might be able to stomach a lower cap, and you can increase rents, maybe quicker. That's the first metric that I use.
And the cap rate, the reason you're using it is because it's the most advertised and the most popular determination of value in the market, right? So like when people are advertising, when people are taking something to market, they're justifying that through some sort of cap rate, and that gives you an indicator of where the purchase price or net operating income.
It gives you a day one picture of what you're dealing with, the income that you're dealing with. And so that, for me, if I'm looking for cash flow, that's the first number that I need to be in a range. Otherwise, I have to move on.
Okay. Did we say what the range was?
No, I mean, I hate to be too specific on that because it just depends on so many factors.
Yeah.
But multifamily deals right now, I want to be, 6.5. It still is skinny, but you can make it work. And then on retail, I need to be at 7.5 or higher for me to make it work.
Okay. So if the cap rate works for you, what's your next step?
Next step for me is I'm going to look at location.
Okay.
Now it depends less with multifamily. We'll go to smaller markets for multifamily because people need a place to live, and so it's a little more secure. I may go to 100,000 population market,
which is pretty small.
I mean, it's getting small. The deal in North Carolina that we had success in, I think it was 90,000 person market. So that's getting small, but we did really well on that property.
That's property. You show up to the airport with 2 gates and you're like, oh, wow.
Yeah.
We may have messed up.
I mean, if it doesn't have an airport, then I'm not obviously going to be looking at that. On retail, though, that's
a big one. I feel like we shouldn't pass over that. If it doesn't, I remember pitching you deals. I remember pitching deals and you're like, how long is it going to take to get there? And I was like, 12 hours. There's not a direct flight. And you're like, pass.
Yeah.
I'm out.
And, could I invest in a small market in Oklahoma that I can go drive to it? Maybe. But the smaller the market, the more you need to know about it because small markets can go away with different industries moving in and out and things changing. And so I tend to want to be at a location that is going to be here in 10 years and it's going to be bigger than it was. And once you get critical mass in a population, in a market, then it'll grow. But, like drive through Haskell here in Oklahoma, and the downtown is a bunch of empty buildings.
Yeah.
Like there's nothing there. It was better 20 years ago than it is today. I'm not taking, a dump on Haskell. I'm just saying it had a downtown and now it doesn't have one.
Yeah.
And so that's why you need to be in a little bit larger market. For retail, I want to be in several 100,000 person market. For me to feel comfortable. Now, the next thing is I'm looking at is where in that market it's at.
Yeah.
So if the market's big enough and the cap rate works and I start to feel okay about it, for retail, I want traffic counts and I want to be in the growth area.
A lot of traffic counts, like a Chick-fil-A or Chipotle. I mean, I think 60,000 cars a day you have to have in front of the Chick-fil-A and a Chipotle.
That's an interesting point. If you can look at some of the retailers around you, I think one investor one time, he invested in the deal just because Chipotle or someone similar was right across the street, and he's like, if it's good enough for them, it's good enough for me. I'm in.
Yeah.
Because they chose to be there and it was new, and so if they chose to open up there, they know they've done all the market research. That's a great area.
Right. Yeah, you want to focus on where people are driving from, where they're driving to, meaning where they're living, where they're going to work, where the highways are. Do they have to pass your retail center? What's around it? What are the jobs like? What's the income of the area? Are people more on the affluent side, or is it more workforce housing? If it's workforce housing in the middle of the most affluent area, maybe that's not good either. I mean, there's a lot of indicators you can look at, just raw data, without seeing it with your eyes in person, of just saying, yeah, this is an area I want to be in.
And you can either yourself or you can pay a small fee to have someone run an economic report on that location, which would give you traffic counts, give you population growth, 1 mile population, 3 mile population, household income, average household income.
Yeah.
So all that. And just people need to think about the markets they're in. Where the growth is going, where new development is. And you also know those areas that were really great maybe 30 years ago that are really kind of older and nothing new is happening there.
Yeah.
Now, can you invest in those areas? Yeah, you can invest, but instead of getting a 7.5 cap deal, you need to get an 8.5 or 9, because the risk is higher. So you want to have higher potential returns.
Yeah, and this way you go visit the property. That's why you fly there or drive there beforehand. You're meeting with banks. You're meeting with local brokers. You're meeting with management companies. Again, all in the area. It's all their market. They're all hopefully have something to gain from the transaction or not. So they're hopefully giving you truthful information. They want to work for you. They want your business. They want you to buy, maybe more in the area. So they're going to tell you about it. They're going to say, man, this is a rough part of town. You really don't want to be here. I'd look a couple miles over. That's where all the new development's going. That's where the new high school is going. Yada, yada,
We ran
yada.
into that in New Mexico. We went out to see this deal that was offered at a pretty high cap. And when we got there, it was the location 20 years ago. And then we kept driving about 3 or 4 miles around the corner. And that was the area. And that's why this property looked bad. And that's why it had even more vacancy than the broker had told us it had. So we passed.
We were misled to fly out there because on a map it looked good. The data looked good. The traffic counts, were decent. But then it's just like this.
Yeah, it was a little rough.
It was rough.
Okay.
So next point.
It's past your cap criteria. It's past your market location criteria. So what are you looking at next? The rents on the place?
Yeah, rents for me.
The rent roll.
The rent roll, we'll say rent roll because rents, I want them to be lower than market, and so I'm going to need a little bit of help if it's outside of my market to understand what those are.
Yep.
But there could be on an apartment deal, maybe it's a mom and pop local owner, and they've owned it for a long time, and so they're still cash flowing at a lower rents, and they don't know that they could be pushing them because they're just comfortable and they're making money. So that would be a good one. On retail, we kind of know now what the first generation looks like in rents per foot, and what the second generation looks like. And if I see a lot of upside in those rents, that's where I'm going to dive in.
First and second generation, you mean of owners, or what's first and second generation?
Yeah. So in retail, if someone, if you build a brand new center or maybe even a build to suit, you're building for like a Whole Foods or,
Chipotle,
a national tenant. Now, what happens, 10 years later when that lease is up and that area isn't as hot, maybe, they'll go and build a new location, and then they'll backfill it with a
Long John Silver's.
Or a local credit.
I see.
Like your local burger joint, let's say, instead of Chipotle, they'll go in there.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean it's bad, but let's say Chipotle was paying $35 a foot in rent. These people may be paying 15 or 20, which is good if it's still a good enough location. But I'm looking at that and saying, okay, what are the rents for that type? And if, like on our Village South deal, we bought it with $10 rents, and they really should have been $16 rents.
Okay,
right.
And so that's what we're quickly trying to assess is are the rents in line? It doesn't necessarily even have to be that they're below market, but to get to the next step in my quick underwriting is, are they in line? Are they too high? And sometimes I see deals, they look good, but the rents are just high, and I see there's nowhere for me to take them, and they're going to be hard to backfill, so I pass.
Okay, and
the upside's a big thing. Not to interrupt. I mean, you've got to kind of, the reason why you're doing that is because you've got to get a baseline of where the cash flow is at today, and you've got to get a baseline of where the cash flow is going to be at in 3, 5, 7, 10 years from now, because you're most likely going to be owning it. And if there's a massive amount of upside because you have $10 rents day one, but you can inch them up to 16, 17, 18 over several years, that's a massive amount of upside.
Well, and vacancy would be another upside, right, that you might look at to see if there's some vacant spaces that you can lease out.
Yeah, that's when you want to buy a hot center, that 7 cap, that, maybe first generation center that you think he's ready to sell, and it's got a vacant or 2. That's when you would want to make the offer. And why, you might ask, is because that's when the net operating income, or it's making less money. So you can give him the same cap rate he wanted when it was full, but it's just making less money, and you can go in and replace that income super easy, maybe even replace it with better income, better tenants.
And we've done that. We've been fortunate to do that. I think there's a little bit of a fine line between a good amount of vacancy and too much vacancy.
Yeah. Okay.
If a center is 30 or more % vacant, there's most likely a problem. Yeah. Why would an owner not have worked hard to fill that?
Yeah,
and the answer is they did work hard to fill it and they couldn't.
Yeah.
But anything less than 30 might be opportunity. Okay. Maybe a couple tenants just moved out. So 10 to 20% vacancy is probably could be upside, and 30 to 40% vacancy may indicate an issue.
Yeah.
Not always, but it's just something to be careful with. But I would say that goes along with the overall upside is after rents, we've established that those are in line. I'm looking at the property and saying, what upside is there? On an apartment deal, it could be, hey, this is not being managed very well. I think a new fresh coat of paint and some landscaping and a new sign could really help me, take the occupancy to the next level or push rents. The retail is kind of the same thing. Maybe there's some tenants that are going to roll and they have really low rent. So there's some really quick upside for me if I can get them to stay at a higher rate. And so that's the next thing is we're just saying, hey, is there any upside on this? Yeah. And of course, you're not going to know for sure. You don't need to know for sure. All I'm doing is saying, is there potentially any upside? If the answer is like, no, I see no upside here, then you may want to move on. And if there is some upside, then it kind of, okay, let's go to the next step and see what it is. And for me, that's debt probably next.
Let's back up.
Yeah.
Right. Because when you're looking at the upside, I'm always looking at the downside. And I know that's not, maybe a whole point we have here, but you have to constantly be wary of where it could go. You need to constantly look for, okay, it's got a little vacancy. What happens if that vacancy doubles? Okay, it doesn't have any vacancy. What happens if I get some? You're throwing a vacancy factor on there. And you're saying, hey, I can lose a tenant or two. Worst case scenario, I'm making the debt. I'm paying the investors, the preferred return, maybe not any splits above and beyond that. But you need to constantly be asking yourself, what's the worst thing that could happen? And just like mentally take a crap on that deal because you have to think of everything that could go wrong and assume it could go wrong.
I think one obvious thing that you might look at is if you have one huge tenant that's taking up a lot of space, what would happen if you lost them, right? Is that part of the downside you're looking at?
Always.
I would tend to steer beginners away from a huge tenant.
They shouldn't go buy an 80,000 square foot Kohl's.
No, I don't think so.
What about a Sears?
Because you're really just betting.
Kmart.
Like obviously everything's a risk and everything's a managed bet.
Yeah.
But if your strategy is I hope they stay and if they don't, I'm screwed.
Go to Vegas and put it on black. It's way more fun.
A tough position. And we've done that. We've had a couple of properties with bigger tenants. We have a Big Lots that moved out in one of our Vegas deals. And now we knew that was a possibility. Actually, I didn't think it would happen. But they were doing so well, they needed more space. And so they moved to a bigger space down the road. And so my inclination was right that the area is good and that they wanted to stay. It just happened that the 30,000 square foot that I was renting them, wasn't enough.
It's like that backhanded compliment. It's like, you're too good.
Yeah. But yeah, I would say stay away from really big box retail right now if I had a suggestion.
Okay. So you mentioned debt. After you've passed all that criteria, you mentioned debt.
Debt is going to be where most of the money comes from. And so there's certain deals that are just going to be easier for me to finance. And the higher LTV I can get, the better the cash on cash return is going to be for my investors.
Do we need to go back to the Kohl's example? Like, what bank is gonna land on an 80,000 square foot Kohl's? It's not going to happen. They're going to be like, dude, what's happening here? The bank doesn't want to lose their money.
Well, you may have someone lend on it, but it may be at 65% LTV.
With,
and so now you're bringing 35% of the money to the table yourself. And so that's tough. Where contrast that with another deal that you can get 85% LTV.
Years of interest only, super long amortization schedules, non-recourse.
Yeah. And so part of the debt will have been factored out in those first few reasons.
Yeah, right.
The market size, the location, the rent, how it looks and where it's located, all of that will help you determine when you get to the debt, okay, I think I can get an 80% LTV deal. If you're going to go a multifamily to get really good agency debt, I think you need to have 90% occupancy for the prior 3 months. Otherwise, there are other options to pay for it or to buy it, but it's more of a bridge loan at higher interest.
It's like dating. I mean, let's be honest. When you get the lender involved, you need to wine and dine him. You need to take him out for a nice steak, and you need to show him a property that's winning and beautiful and producing so well, making so much money for us. And then, I'm not saying it can go downhill. I'm just saying, it's really important in underwriting that everything looks good, or else the loan is going to cost you more money. Let's be real.
You need to sell the lender on it to get 100%. The best terms for sure. Okay, last thing that we may do.
So you think you can get the debt?
Let's say we think it's at least 75% LTV I can get, which is kind of a benchmark for me. If I can't get 75%, there's too many other deals I can get that debt on.
Yeah.
And I don't want to have too much of my money in any one deal. Yeah. So I can get the debt. Now I've got to turn it around and say, okay, how will this property present to the equity partners? Mm-hmm. Because we want to be able to raise money. Obviously, we're going to invest some, but I don't want to be 100% of the equity. And so we have to think about, are my investors going to feel safe with this? Yeah. Will it return enough money for them? Do I feel comfortable pitching this deal? The deal we did in North Carolina was a really small market, and I'd never been to the state of North Carolina before. So I may have thought it was a good deal, but just imagine me pitching that to the investors. Hey, guys, this is a great deal. It's a super small market. I've never seen the property. I've never been to the state of North Carolina, but I just really think we should go for it. Mm-hmm. Are you with me? So that's going to be a really tough sell. And so we didn't.
What crazy guy would do that?
Yeah. So we didn't go out to our broad investor group because did I think it was going to work? Yes. But if it didn't work and they say, now, Joel, this didn't work, I wouldn't be able to defend why I did it.
Yeah. Looking at the downside.
Yeah. So I want to be able to defend why I'm investing their money. Mm-hmm. And so that all these reasons that you've kind of really briefly gone through should help you on this last point to say, okay, my investors, I can get them the return they want. The market's good enough. They're going to like Vegas, or they're going to like, Phoenix. This is a good part of Tulsa. The returns are good. What else? There's I can pitch them some upside because I've identified some key, upside indicators.
Yeah.
And so those are the steps that I go through to help me weed through hundreds of deals, because many of the deals won't meet one of those, and I can determine that in a matter of minutes. And then you're left with deals that you then have to go further into the underwriting, going through the leases, the market, things like that, and take even more time. But you just can't do that on every deal.
Yeah. Okay. But every now and then you catch a live one, you yell down the hallway, I got a live one. Yeah, I got it.
And once you find one that checks all the boxes, you may have to move very, very quickly.
Yeah.
Because somebody else is out there doing the same thing you're doing.
Yeah, but again, I mean, there's 5-6 points. You're going through fairly quick on each one. You know, you maybe have your preferred Excel model open of choice, just kind of hold some inputs or whatever, give you some rough IRR, cash on cash outputs, you know, different debt or amortization timelines. There's a lot of variables and assumptions. But if you can just go through this and learn what questions to ask, quickly learn a system that's comfortable for yourself, that works with your investors and your ability to get debt and your property types you're going after, you can work through this 10, 15 minutes or less. You're going to know whether or not you want to buy this property, whether or not you think you can get debt, raise equity, and then you just keep pursuing that, right? Yeah. You keep going until something is too wrong to where you got to pull the plug, right?
That is how we do it. And going back to an earlier episode, there are always going to be reasons to talk you out of buying every deal.
Yeah.
And so be prepared. This is convincing you to buy, but looking at the downside, you will want to do that, but you're always going to have reasons not to buy. So when you find one that checks a lot of boxes, at some point you're going to have to go for it.
Yep. Yep. It's hard work to keep buying.
Yep.
For sure.
All right.
Well, if you are listening, if you're an audio listener, make sure to check us out on YouTube. We film it every week. Make sure to check us out on the web, howtoinvestinCRE.com. Other than that, thanks for joining us, and we will see you next week. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.